Everyone, welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. You probably heard me say that a few times before, I would imagine, if you've listened to the episodes. Is that true?
Just a few times,
Just
and
a
I'm
few
glad to be
times.
here. I'm
Well,
glad to be
thanks for
here.
coming. I'm glad you're here. Delighted to be talking comics and storytelling and Stephen King and all the things with author Eric Williamson. Eric, you have an amazing shelf behind you. I told you I would shout that out, and I always appreciate a good shelfie. So thanks for bringing all of the books.
I did. I brought them just for you.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank
Normally,
you.
normally these shelves are just completely empty, and
Yes,
because I knew I was meeting with you today, I just stocked everything on them as quickly as possible.
it's
No,
quite an
I
impressive
jest.
amassing collection. That's really nice. It's really nice. The action figure, no less, as well.
Yes, this is my Constantine. He brings me a little magical support.
I thought I recognized that long coat. I thought that was Constantine. It's a little hard to spot from here, but I thought that was indeed Constantine. Yes,
Well, I
yes,
don't
yes.
have the best camera, so
Oh, it works. It totally works. So you're a person who is obviously steeped in comics lore and variety of stories here. And we were talking about, as I mentioned, Stephen King and mutual love of Stephen King and Skeleton Crew before I hit record. So I always ask an origin style question. How did you find your way to storytelling in comics?
sure. I think my did my computer just freeze?
I think you're good. I think you're all right.
Oh, for some reason it's acting weird. Sorry.
No, you're
Um,
good. You had a pensive moment, but I thought you were sort of thinking about it. So, but that's okay. That works.
I to answer your question about the origin story. I mean, what's connected me to comics and storytelling? I've just always been drawn to the power of stories to transport to transport you to other worlds. We were just talking about Stephen King before the podcast started, and Skeleton Crew was one of those influential first tomes of
Hmm.
short stories of his that just really I found myself completely entranced by the fact that he could write such a diversity of different types of stories.
Yeah, yeah.
Some that had an element of science fiction to them, some that were extremely absurd. Also, the ability to play with different types of language and sentence structures and paragraph formats. I mean, some of the uh, I thought was really unique. And I shared with you one of my favorite stories out of Skeleton Crew, which I can't remember the title of. Go figure. But it's the one with the guy trapped on the desert island with a suitcase of cocaine that winds up just chopping himself into pieces and cannibalizing himself. I just found
Yeah.
that it was something that writing, sort of that horror and macabre writing that Stephen King brought to the table, was so influential at a young age that I it, I don't know, it sort of planted its seed
Oh,
and
yeah.
realized that the power of storytelling could take me to places that I, in my sort of formulative brain, could never have fathomed. And I think that sort of led me down the path of really finding a home in science fiction and fantasy and horror authors,
Hmm. Hmm.
and on top of that, at the same time as I was reading, sort of just just steeping myself in as much book, novels, short stories in those particular genres that I could at a young age. I was also on the same time reading comic books,
Oh, yeah.
and my exposure to sort of that medium. Um, and what I really loved about that particular medium was the fact that it was one that I shared with my friends at a young age. It was really a participatory medium. Comic books were always a thing when I was little. We'd get on our bikes and we'd ride down to the local convenience store and spin the spinner rack and grab whatever we could afford with the quarters in our pocket, and roll them up, stick them in our back pocket, get on our huffies and ride our bicycles home, and then just lay them all out. You'd read them, and then we'd pass them back and forth, and we would share them with each other because we what we were making like a couple bucks for allowance, right? Comics
Wow.
were 75 cents, or maybe they were less at the time. So, we would be able to pool our money, and it sort of was this really um, cool way to maximize our potential and
Mm-hmm.
sort of share the costs associated with it. And it was never about like the collector mentality when I was young. It was very much about the collaborative storytelling experience and
Yeah.
being able to escape together in our own minds and, almost have these sort of like virtual battle worlds between our favorite characters, pitting them up against each other and all the what ifs that came out of it. So, comics coupled with, at being an avid reader at a young age and then just holding on to that all the way through maturity just fostered this fascination for the sort of untapped potential and evocative power of language and storytelling. And, and with comics, and that happens to be something I'm really focused on right now, the how the two elements of the art and the writing in harmony become sort of a greater than the sum of their parts, right?
Mm-hmm.
That
Mm-hmm.
that um, that intersection or that synthesis creates moments that elevate the um, elevate the experience greater than just each in their own silos.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I love that marriage of word and image. And I was doing some fact checking. So the story you were talking about was Survivor Type from Skeleton
Survivor
Crew.
type,
Yes, yes,
yes.
yeah. Now, as far as your work, folks out there can go and find some of it around the web. Prismatic is an anthology that you've been in, as well as there's a book called Miscreant. I believe that's a 3 issue kind of thing. And then you shared a couple with me, which you were very kind to do. Whispers from the Voyage and When We Were the Voyage. So, curious about the inspiration behind this particular kind of direction in comics and the Voyage duology.
So let's see. Well, let me make a couple just kind of little corrections there. So
Sure, sure.
prismatic, yeah,
Hmm.
no problem. I don't expect anyone to know my body of work. So, but it's just interesting hearing actually somebody talking about it. It's great. I appreciate it.
Yes, yes.
Prismatic is an anthology comic book that I am currently seeking a publisher for. So
Ah, nice, nice.
it hasn't gone out to the public yet. Um, it's a really really cool anthology project with 4 artists, 4 stories, 4 artists, one writer, um, and it is sort of a sci-fi drama, romance,
Hmm.
horror slash adventure type of collaboration.
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
we're looking for, we just finished that project. And so we're looking for publishing avenue.
Nice,
If we
nice.
don't decide to just go ahead and self-publish, which is what I've done with everything else, because I'm just not that great yet. Publishers are beating down my door.
It's a
So
competitive, strange, strange world, but it's kind of cool that there are so many ways to do that now to get your work out there.
yeah, it's really been a big learning lesson, as well as really inspirational to go through the steps needed to self-publish your own work,
Hmm.
and then to market it, to go through the production cycle, through the development cycle, to get it out there through distribution, and ultimately getting it into a reader's hands, and then hopefully they give you some feedback if you're lucky.
Yeah.
And I think that has been, I think that's been essential. I think that's really valuable for anybody sort of coming up into the space of being a writer author, is to take those steps to and take the time to let yourself um, create without fear of failure. You
Hmm.
know.
Hmm.
and to just go ahead and be brave and bold and put your work out there. Everyone has a story to tell, and everyone can do it. It felt very intimidating to start, and probably why I procrastinated doing it for so many years while I've had all these stories to tell. And it was after putting that first book together, which was Miscreant.
Uh-huh,
And
uh-huh.
Miscreant was a standalone collaboration with one of my friends from 40 years ago, who was one of those kids that we were on the carpet reading comics and swapping them with.
Nice,
We
nice.
Who has moved on in his life and become a very talented artist. And we regrouped later in life and finished the project that we started when we were 10, but now as adults.
Hmm.
And,
Hmm.
just going through the ropes of creating something and doing the design, layout, the page formatting, and then getting it produced and picking out the paper, and just all the steps that needed to get that book out the door and into someone's hand. It was a great learning lesson, and has empowered me then to subsequently put out all these other initiatives that I've wanted to for so long, the poetry books and
Yeah.
creativity journals, and also this big project that I've been working on when we were the Voyage. So I know I sort of digress. It was a long way to drive to the store to find out it's closed, right?
No, no, no. That is all good. It's interesting to hear. I was going to ask about creative process, so that weaves in a little bit to the next question too. So it is all good.
Yeah. So what was your question exactly? It was something about you were asking about when we were the Voyage. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah. So I was asking about inspiration, sort of how the
Mm.
story came to be, because as I mentioned, you shared it with me. You were kind enough to let me be a beta reader, so greatly appreciated that.
Yes, and thank you, sir. Thank you.
Anytime, anytime.
I I appreciated having your chops and eyeballs and your mental fortitude to kind of poke holes in that story. Um, the inspiration, sort of, for when we were the Voyage, really just came from a deep seated desire of mine to sort of explore those deepest, darkest recesses and corners of the human psyche, and
Mhm.
really to play around with um, existential horror and the edges, the edges of our understanding. And
Yeah.
having been a huge fan of the cosmic horror type writings of like H.P. Lovecraft, right, and August Derleth, and just all of sort of my background with a lot of different horror authors, some of the more modern ones and definitely the more classical ones. I wanted to craft a story that would leverage my passion for the horror genre
Hmm.
coupled with sci-fi,
Hmm.
and to tackle and confront some of those unsettling areas of that sort of deal with our own sort of cosmic insignificance, and that the fragility of our reality.
Yeah. Yeah.
But at the same time, Jason, I wanted to do it in a way that was unique and fresh and different from everything else out there that I have been reading or have seen.
Hmm.
I wanted to create a narrative that was completely disarming, repugnant,
Right, right.
um, from cover to cover, will leave you in a state of complete disarray and unnerved. I wanted to really just kind of push along the boundaries of what would be tolerable.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then when I got to those edges, to just jump off and take it further. So besides just trying to revolt a reader, which is, certainly a particular area of the horror genre, I
Hmm.
wanted to also entrance them with a story where they were not just a passive reader of the narrative, but were an active participant in the narrative as it unfolds. And so I developed sort of a dual narrative structure. So I've got sort of this main storyline for When We Were the Voyage. Um, and that chronicles the story of the harvester and the feaster, who are our two villainous protagonists,
Hmm.
and sort of their descent upon Earth, and the cataclysmic consequences of their arrival here. And that allows the readers to kind of experience this grand scope of cosmic horror. They get to see and experience entire cities and populations being consumed by the darkness that comes with these invaders
Hmm.
from
Hmm.
another universe or reality. We don't quite know that yet. But then interspersed through the main narrative are these standalone, partially second person vignettes, partially a combination of third and second person in different locations that are being ravaged by the harvester and feaster's influence.
Hmm. Hmm.
And this allows for the reader to not only get a unique and distinct POV that's separate from the third person sort of omniscient or limited point of view of, I'm reading this story, these events are happening, the plot is moving from point A to point B.
Hmm. Hmm.
But now interspersed, the the reader is actively on the ground, so to speak, like in the middle of the wartime, in the middle of the fight, and they are forced to confront the horror and the madness of the chaos that is brought upon humanity by these alien invaders.
Hmm.
I also am attempting to also weave in sort of a thread that thematically hits at some of the core themes that I think are important that I'm trying to deal with as an artist, which is, what if the power of art, which is typically in our reality is used to create, right?
Hmm.
What if the power of art is used to destroy? And how does the weaponization of art impact a culture? And one of the reveals that happens very quickly in the story, so I don't feel like this is a spoiler yet, even though it hasn't released in its entirety,
Hmm.
is that the harvester and feaster are actually these spacefaring cosmic artists.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the organic life and the different civilizations that they have come on, because you quickly get a sense in the first scenes of the Ashcan that we are not the first civilization that they have come across in the void, that the organic matter is not only their food and fuel, but also their paint, their inks. It
Hmm.
is the material by which they themselves create. And so their artistry is one of entropy and disdain and decay and murder.
Hmm.
And they are able to harness and focus the power of art to destroy and to reap worlds.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it becomes a really interesting experiment and an opportunity for me to sort of challenge my own sort of themes regarding the human condition and sort of the belief structure of art and the impact art has in our lives, but do so in a way that's really fun and kick ass to read, right? Because it's
Hmm. Hmm.
crazy what
Yeah.
is happening. And it's done through the lens of science fiction and horror and alien invasion and giant monstrosities and kaiju and swarms and all different types of creature types and cool spaceships, the cool liquefaction of human beings into cryopods and doing all kinds of just crazy things that my imagination just is allowed to go wild.
Hmm.
And um, the, so therefore, I guess out of that sprung this title, which just seemed so fitting to me, which was When We Were the Voyage.
Yeah.
It is, it both invites the collaborative reader author relationship. It's something that's happening to us. It's when we were both participating in this, the voyage
Hmm.
being partially the voyage of the harvester and feaster here, our own life voyage experience. It's a very layered title, but I think as you continue to peel the onion of this story, it kind of keeps coming back to you and sort of just hitting you across the jaw
Hmm.
what When We Were the Voyage really is all about and who really is the main character in the story. Um, One thing that's been really interesting in developing this story, Jason, is that I initially went out with this ash can
Hmm.
called We Were the Voyage, and it was a one chapter teaser to sort of test the waters before I put all of this into a project that may just die on the vine and not be received well. I wanted to sort of test the universe
Hmm.
and see if there was a audience that was interested in participating in this experience, this experiment of mine. So I put this thing together and sent it out there. And we printed a few hundred copies, and they sold out,
Nice,
which
nice.
was awesome. It was really awesome. Then we went back, did a second printing, and it has mostly sold out. I've got a few copies like this one still lying around. But it was really great because I got the opportunity to sort of test the idea and to
Hmm.
see if there was if it would be received well, and it it was very favorably received, and it also then has allowed me to kind of continue to build this cake
Hmm.
and to
Hmm.
add layers to it. And so the idea of opening the door to beyond just my idea of having active participation by the reader through second person immersion was to say, hey, those of you that have participated by reading chapter one and spending $5 and jumping on a board and being a part of this voyage,
Hmm. Hmm.
let me know. And I had sort of an open door, a window where I invited those who wanted to jump on board with me to have cameo spots in the finished product.
Nice, nice.
So there was sort of like a small little recruitment window where I think 25 people immediately flooded in and were like, yes, please murder me in the graphic novel. I give you full approval, thumbs up. And it just started a conversation. And it, that it got allowed me to kind of leverage some word of mouth and get buy-in
Hmm.
from readers, and also to kind of cultivate some loyalty, I hope, with some of my readers that are anticipating, the end result where they are actively sort of spotlit in the book.
Nice, nice. So you mentioned, and we talked about When We Were the Voyage, but there's also Whispers from the Voyage. So how do these two projects sort of relate to each other?
Yeah, so while I am working on the the full graphic novel and getting that closer to completion. And currently it's sitting at roughly 124 pages, 62-page
Mhm.
spread. Um, yeah, that's the right math. And it has in its it is a large format hardcover graphic novel that we want to push out with, that I want to push out with. And I have an amazing artist on the project, Jamie Ryan from the UK, who is my main continuity artist that's writing a lot, doing a lot of the art for the main storyline. But I've
Mhm.
subsequently brought on over 15 artists that are
Nice.
doing the narrative, the vignettes, I call them, which really speaks to what we talked about sort of at the beginning of the interview, of that sort of finding that synthesis or that harmony of the art and the word that sort of makes it a better, it's the better sum of its parts.
Hmm.
Um, I wanted the opportunity to be able to showcase a lot of different artistic styles, um, which breaks up sort of the monotony of the story as well and gives a lot of fresh visuals. Also allows me to write and steer a particular vignette piece to align it to a specific artist's sensibility. And for me, that's just been a blessing because it's allowed me the opportunity, I think, to create a better story because
Hmm.
of the collaborations, because everyone is bringing a unique vision and eye. So as we get closer to finishing that book and publishing it later this year, I'm doing this so that when I look back at this, I'm like, yep, Eric, you said this year. That's
It's a
right.
marker. It's a goal.
I want it. I do want to kind of continue to drip feed content out there to keep the momentum up and to keep interest in the project. Um, and there was a perfect timing with May 4th being Free Comic Book Day
Hmm.
and Star Wars Day, right? But more so the Free Comic Book Day. I thought, well, that's just a really good opportunity for me to take this other story that I've written for When We Were the Voyage that didn't necessarily fit the the graphic novel,
Hmm.
um, but is an adjacent sort of like tangential tale that could fit within the universe. And why don't I just go ahead and produce it and put it out there for free,
Right,
and
right.
and just create content and just get it out there and just see if people just, one, they're getting something for free. It's Free Comic Book Day. Um, but at the same time, there is a cost associated with me printing hundreds of copies of my comic and dispersing it all throughout the state of Arizona to half a dozen comic shops and then putting it out there online. And so I did produce a limited 50 copies that are um, in a nice sort of premium card stock with silk gloss paper
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
I could sell on my website for $10. It's 20 pages, so it's basically a full comic in a prestige or premium format with really good quality stock to help me at least cover my own costs associated with the hundreds of smaller ash can style paper versions that I just took bundles to all the comic shops and just was like, here,
Nice, nice.
there you go. Um, but so Whispers from the Voyage, to answer your question, is subtitled Stories from the When We Were the Voyage universe.
Hmm.
And I wanted to brand Whispers from the Voyage, almost it's sub like an under the umbrella When We Were the Voyage brand, to allow me and afford me the opportunity, a place to continue beyond just this story, to tell other um, sort of standalone one shots that are set in the universe.
Hmm. Hmm.
The idea behind what are the whispers in Whispers from the Voyage. I'm just going to show this again, and maybe it will pop up on the screen. So the art that I did for this book, on the cover, there is sort of this emergence as if a ship is bursting out of reality and it's sending a cascade of ripples,
Hmm. Hmm.
almost like a stone that's dropped in a lake that's placid. Um, and the idea the catalyst of this was that when in my mind's eye, when the harvester and the feaster emerge into a new reality, a new universe, a new civilization, um, their malevolence, their despair, their vile disdain, apathy for all life is so powerful, so overbearing that it actually sends out a cascade or ripple throughout
Mm-hmm.
the cosmos in that local vicinity and begins to influence and impact any organic life, but on not on a physical level necessarily, but impacting their culture, impacting their art, impacting their literature, impacting their comics.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So their influence is felt by the culture prior to their actual arrival. And so little do we know, this sort of prelude standalone story, they are coming, right? They're not here yet, narratively, plot wise, but the effects of their arrival have already been felt
Mm-hmm.
and just don't know that. So the story allowed me to write this tale of a seedling of cosmic dread,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
as if the harvester and feaster's malevolence has already impacted our comic books. And so here I was able to play around with these sort of meta narrative tools.
Right, right.
Because it's free comic book day. I am giving away a free comic. You are getting the comic and reading the comic that the actual story is wrapped around.
Mm-hmm.
And so the story is about our protagonist, Arthur, who is going to a comic book shop on free comic book day looking for, and trying to acquire and grab all the freebies or what have you. And it just so happens to be that the shop he's in, there's a bunch of sort of snarky other customers that allows me to kind of write this meta commentary on the comic store environment and the
Mm-hmm.
comic community as a whole out there and all the sort of differing opinions and
Right.
sentiments about publishing and distribution and indie versus the big two, the big Marvel and DC, the man versus the independent. And I could kind of play around with a lot of different voices by having it take place at the beginning in a comic book store.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I got to write in sort of this like meta narrative, and Arthur is handed this copy of a book called Whispers from the Voyage.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And some of the characters sort of tease that this book is going to leave you transformed if you're brave enough, and they kind of dangle the carrot and the challenge, and it's going to peel open your cranium and just pour cosmic dread into your skull and leave you forever changed, which is exactly what happens. He goes home. And this book divided into three acts. The second act sort of explores Arthur's tale of what happens to him as he's reading this book that's seeded with the influence by the harvester and feaster. And as
Yeah.
you can imagine, it's it's a horror story, so I'll leave it at that.
Right,
The
right.
third act then allows me to play and tease a little bit about what the greater work is to come, which is that the reader has been supplanted. The reader has, or just by the act of reading this little one shot, they have become infested themselves psychologically, um, in preparation for the coming madness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I was able to play around with Jason sort of the language where, and you've read it, so you kind of know the language in the third act really ramps up to almost an inane level where your grasp of just the language and the story itself becomes untenable
Hmm.
and sort of instills a sense of madness in its comprehension.
Right,
And
right.
I really liked the way that it turned out at the end, that you're left with sort of bated breath when the story's over. You're left, what just happened to me? At least I feel I that was my intent, and I feel that going back and reading the book a few times over.
Hmm.
And some of the feedback from people has been very much like, WTF, what the fuck just happened?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that's uh, excellent.
Yeah, yeah. Well, if I'm a reader out there, if I'm a listener, and I want to know where I can find the book, um, anything about that as far as where people can go, and also kind of the next creative steps you'd like to take, because it sounds like you're building an entire world here.
Well, yeah, they can go to
Hmm. Hmm.
miscreantmedia.bigcartel.com. That's my website. Uh, I'm sure you'll have like links in the thing and all
Yep,
that, um,
absolutely.
where they can click over to that. They can get a copy if they go there, or they go to my link tree / Eric Williamson. They can just go and download and get a free copy of the book that I just talked about for free. And so,
Nice,
um,
nice.
some people don't like to read in a digital format, which I totally get. So I have the really fancy schmancy one on the website
Hmm.
for $10, but I also have on the website the free comic book day version. Um, I can't give it away for free, obviously, because I'm going to have to ship it to you. So I'm asking people to pay for shipping, and the minimum I can like do a transaction on my site is 50 cents. So it's like you can get a version of it for 50 cents plus shipping, basically, if you really want a physical copy. But free digitally for anyone at all. They can go and get it, download it, read it on their phone or on their tablet or whatever.
Very cool. And creative vision, because as I said, you have work on the way, you have an anthology that you're currently shopping, so it sounds like you have steps you'd like to take in creating.
Yeah, so interestingly, and this was probably bad timing on my part, Jason, I not only came out with Whispers from the Voyage this last week, I also came out with a new art and poetry book.
Nice, nice. I
So,
love the range. Yeah, yeah.
which was a bit too much to handle, and I probably wasn't very smart about syncing it up, but I have this book called And in Our Absence.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a nice 6 by 6, 90-page book of poetry and art. So every page is a micro poem, like a short 30-second or less poem with a page of art. So again, it speaks to that sort of marrying of the two art forms.
Hmm.
So this is sort of the other side of the coin. Is while I do like the comics and I do like the sci-fi and the horror, I also am and studied in college poetry, and I've always been a huge lover of poetry and the written word, the spoken word. And so this is now my third book of poetry, and
Nice, nice.
those are I've got right over here. This is Our Secret, and this is What of Us Remains. These are my two other books of poetry, conveniently placed.
Bookends right there. Yeah,
I mean, how did that happen? It's
I
magical.
know, I know. Yeah,
So
Constantine arranged it. That's what it is.
it wasn't there at the start of a video. If you go back and check, they just
That's right.
magically appeared.
That's right.
Um, yeah, no, I've definitely been a busy bee for sure. Um, right now, I am 100% focused on completing the graphic novel.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea is, and I would, if anybody watching it is sounds like an interesting tale that they, are think or have any type of advice for me in helping me to find a publisher, I'm looking at taking this graphic illustrated novel to to get it published, whether it's a comic book style publisher, like um, in Image Comics or something like that, right? Or if
Hmm.
it's a more traditional publisher or a publisher of specifically horror and sci-fi as well. Because and ultimately at the end of the day, I think that I would be best served by finding someone that could partner with that would help me be able to get the reach and distribution that I think it deserves to be able to reach the largest potential audience so the harvester and feaster can truly take over and dominate. Um, but at the end of the day, I will self-publish and make sure I get it out to my readers' hands because I think that it has a lot of longevity besides just the initial tale. And so to answer your question about what does the future look like, um, I have I see that when we were the Voyage potentially being one of those defining um, uh, what's the word, sagas
Hmm. Hmm.
that I will continue to be able to write for many years to come. Um, I have teased a few times out there in some forums on some websites the actual 100 chapters that I've written beyond just what's out there in the graphic novel, where once they're done with this particular narrative tale, how the harvest, where the harvester and feaster go beyond that, and how, and one, not only to take it to sort of larger and larger steps and continue to build the steeple, but
Hmm.
also what are those, because I also am utilizing it to sort of challenge thematically those areas and issues in the human condition that I want to explore.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, whether it's, beyond just our humanity to the next layer of like our pantheon, our gods, the next layer of that, the universe that we live in, and what does that mean, and time and realities and multiplicity and the emotional power of narration. And then as I continue to layer this giant big onion I have in my hands right now, just how we can continue to press against the thought of that's beyond just a narrator, beyond just a writer and the story that he wants to tell, and how the characters in the story can push back at me.
Nice, nice.
So
I like the meta narrative. I like the creative.
thank you. Yeah, it's been
Yeah,
a lot
yeah.
of fun, and I want to continue to leverage that, but um, hopefully do so in a way that people are interested in, that's
Hmm.
exciting, and is just a really cool story to ride on and
Yeah,
to be a part of.
yeah.
That's a lot of fun and challenging and extreme and rewarding.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Cool, cool. Well, anything that we missed in the talk through that you want to make sure to share before we close out?
Um, I guess we've kind of beaten this one a little bit to death, but I think one of the things that's really interesting, and I'm curious, Jason, what you've thought about the form factor when you were one of the beta readers on Whispers from the Voyage.
Hmm.
You read it digitally.
Hmm.
How do you think your experience reading it digitally um, differed from if you maybe had a physical copy of that story and were able to read it? Do you think you would have experienced it differently?
I've been reading digitally now for quite a while and quite a while with comics. I don't mind to read digitally, especially if it's a brief kind of form, which this was. I used to do like an award program. I was a juror for an award program for graphic novels, and they started going full digital. So it was like it was reading 40 PDFs of graphic novels in a couple of months, and that was a lot. But as far as, kind of the navigation, and I read it on my phone. So there's still a little bit of control there, you know? I mean, with a paper copy, you do kind of have that control. You can look ahead a little bit easier. You can kind of engage that way. But I mean, I still found it enjoyable.
Excellent. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
I think that's one of the things that with this upcoming project, I'm still looking for some feedback on. In my mind's eye, I have this sort of vision for this sort of deluxe, oversized hardcover, because of I do want to really showcase the artist and the
Hmm.
artistry of the artists that have been contributing these absolutely mind-rending 11 by 17 um, calamities that are just
Right.
absolutely, they deserve the real estate to be able to really shine.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I like digital because of the fact that, you can pinch and zoom, and sometimes with large art, especially if you're reading on a tablet versus a phone, it has, it's backlit, and it's you can get a lot of vibrancy out of it. So there's sort of pros and cons to them both, but I really like the physical medium.
Hmm.
Obviously,
Hmm.
child, and I love my physical medium, but so I have been looking at those formats, and I there's a couple really inspirational books that I've been utilizing as sort of a basis for um, my own thought process. And I have them here. I just thought they were really cool because, and they're great to show off. Is this The artist is Behringer, and it's this Call of Cthulhu, this Lovecraft Call
Yeah.
of Cthulhu. Have you seen this thing? It is.
I've seen that
You see
around
it now.
somewhere, I think. Yeah.
I mean, look at my head. It is enormous, right? I
Yeah.
mean, my
Yeah.
head's enormous already, but so this book must be just gargantuan. And it is exactly the vision I have for sort of my book, which is these huge, sweeping illustrations,
Yeah.
and then with the sort of the illustrated novel format. So the text is inlaid, right, and you have these beautiful, ginormous illustrations, um, where the narrative elements, similar to Whispers from the Voyage, the narrative elements on the page have a lot of artifacts and a lot of elements that sort of visually make it more engaging
Yeah.
to look at and to read. Um, but this type of, getting something produced on that type of scope and scale is probably going to be a little bit challenging.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about the affordances of like the phone and tablets. The nice thing is there are all of those options now. And you're also talking about like the cost effectiveness. So it's
Yeah.
nice to be able to play in different formats and kind of be able to share what you want to in a way that doesn't require gatekeeping and doesn't require um, having a vision that then doesn't get to be until the right moment just happens to strike up if it ever does. So, uh,
Hmm.
yeah, great tools out there to utilize for sure.
Yep. I agree.
Yeah, yeah. Well, many thanks for the time. Many thanks for the conversation. Many thanks for the Shelfie, the Constantine figure, and also for sharing the work with me. I appreciate that, and glad to have you back anytime to talk as projects are coming along.
Well, thank you, Jason. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.